As science is advancing, getting a top physique is more and more attainable naturally if you just stay open-minded and learn. And that's what I did, and I found ways to double, if not triple your gains and mine. And I didn't lie in the title. You can double your gains in 6 weeks. But that is it. 6 weeks. Using stretch-mediated hypertrophy. And this basically means that you get sarcomerogenesis. Yeah, that's the word. So your muscles grow in series instead of cross-sectionally. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, it is boring. And the only way to measure it is by looking at fascicle length. But what does even all of these mean? It just means that the longer the fascicle, the more force you can produce. That is why beginners become exponentially stronger in the beginning, and this strength gain becomes disappointingly slower. Actually, this is just one mechanism behind it, out of the hundreds. But how do you achieve this great muscle growth? Is by training the muscle at the lengthened position in the eccentric, and it has to be passive tension. Like pendulum squats, glutes are under stretch. Hamstring curl, because of your hip bend and straight legs, your hamstrings are stretched. Bench press, your pecs are under load when your arms are below 90 degrees. So what does it mean? You should only do these exercises and you are going to grow twice as fast as someone who is doing chest flies, biceps curls, or leg extension? And the answer is no. We know that the only thing that grows muscle is mechanical tension. We also know that the muscle has to be active in order to experience this passive tension. And it's down to its architecture and the length-tension relationship. But what is up with all of these boring terms? But let's take a look. It consists of an ascending limb, so that's your typical concentric phase, or the shortening of the muscle, or cross-bridge formation by actin and myosin. So boring. The plateau that you usually reach with your calf training really early on, and the descending limb, or eccentric, or the lengthening of your muscles, or sarcomeres. And these are describing the sarcomere length, and that will dictate where they like to work or operate, if we want to stay fancy. It just means that your brain is only going to use the muscle that has the leverage in that given range of motion. But let's look at an example. When you do a hammer curl from 0 to 90 degree, it is the long head of the biceps having the best leverage, therefore it will work. From 90 degree onwards, it is your brachiae. And I know what you are thinking. Does it mean that hypertrophy is shifting from muscle to muscle even in an isolation exercise? Fuck yes. But only if it gets enough stimulus, and that will depend on your training status. And this is why your execution and setup in an exercise are crucial. You can't just expect your body to use your glutes in a very deep squat because they don't have leverage and they are also not active in that depth. That will be your adductors and your quads, and around 120 degrees your glutes and your quads will take over. So yes, depth is not always important. Try to tell that to your girlfriend. But does this mean that you shouldn't do full range of motion, just do partials? For that we need to dig a bit deeper. Fuck. That's 1-0 to your girlfriend already. But now you know that to have sarcomerogenesis or stretch-mediated hypertrophy, you need to tick a few conditions. Mechanical tension, the muscle has to be active, the active range of motion, and it also has to have the leverage, neuromuscular matching. Well, technically, those two are the same. Kinda. And the muscle has to have the architecture to experience it or to operate in that range of motion. It is all fucking confusing. But let's look at the quads. If you take a look at their length to tension relationship and their architecture, many studies have measured it and they all came to a different conclusion. Because there are many ways to measure it. So it is all fucking confusing. So let's use a study where they compared half squat to a full squat. One group did 90-degree knee flexion, and that is way smaller than you think. It is not parallel with the ground, while the other group did a full squat as to grass. And they measured the glutes, the quads and the adductors. After the study ended, they saw no change in the hamstring, but the stabilizers, obviously, and in the rectus femoris, the longest head of your quads. Interesting. But the glutes grew from 2.2% to 6.7%, and that is almost triple the gains, and the adductors went from 2.7% to 6.2%, and that is 2.3 times the change. And this just shows how much better the glutes are growing at longer muscle length, and that the ATG squats needs a better name, like adductor squats. And it also shows that the quads are growing better too. Not all of them, but some of them at longer muscle length. If only they could stay active, but no, they are giving all of their gains to the adductors. If we take a look at a study where they compared seated versus lying hamstring curl, we will see that the lying one has literally no benefit over the seated one. And I mean nothing at all. The whole hamstring grew 14% on the seated and 9% on the lying, and that is almost 4 times the growth. No wait. And the biarticular muscles, a fancy way to say that a muscle across both hip and knee joint, grew 8 to 24% versus 4 to 19%. That is twice the size. Well, not for all though. So just because it was lengthened and trained at that position, it grew twice more. So now we are wondering, why not just do stiff leg deadlift? And that is just stretching. Yeah, except the adductors and the glutes are really good at this exercise too, and since they have the leverage, they can easily lead this exercise, leaving you with inverted hamstrings, like most deadlifters have. Yeah, but what about the biceps? Does it get extra growth? Well, lucky you, in this study, they measured the initial range of motion in a preacher curl compared to the final range of motion, and they measured cross-sectional area to see which one grew more. But we need fascicle length. Where is it? Well, they didn't measure it. Not to mention, for the biceps, this is the stretch position. Preacher curl is nowhere near close to being stretched. Anyway, they found that the biceps around 70% grew significantly more for the initial group, and at 50% it was similar for both groups. So they grew more closer to the end of the biceps, showing that the range of motion changes, and where the exercise is the hardest is where the muscle grows. And that is one point to exercise selection. But what about the triceps? And this was a really well done study. They did an overhead triceps extension versus anatomical triceps extension and measured the anatomical cross-sectional area, and that is a problem because it is still not fascicle length. We know that the triceps long head is not active in an overhead position, and the other two has great leverage. And funny enough, in an overhead position, the whole cross-sectional area grew significantly more than compared to the anatomical one. And that can show that you don't know how to do triceps extension, and also that the triceps is just growing better in that other position. And the funny thing is, it is not related to stretch-mediated hypertrophy because the medial and the lateral head of the triceps cannot be stretched. It is only crossing one joint. And since the triceps long head is not active when your arm is above your head, it is not experiencing passive tension, because that's one condition to tick. The muscle has to be active. So then what's the reason behind this magical growth? Well, we don't know. Yeah, so that we need more data, and that's amazing. So just to conclude everything, you can get stretch-mediated hypertrophy, but not for all the muscles. It's mainly the leg muscles and maybe the chest and maybe some of the legs, if only they could stay active, but they don't. And it's also that you only get it for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks it hits a plateau and you barely get anything. So there is a chance that if you trained for 1 year and if you did squats, bench press, hamstring curl, you already maxed it out if you at least did it for 3 months. I'm sorry. So this is not magical. It's already maxed out. Anyway, talk to you in the next one.